Hey, what's up you guys, it's Dorothy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to go into chapter 6 of The Women of the Bible Speak by Shannon Bream. We are almost done with this entire book, so we are making our way through this. This chapter is going to contain the stories of Esther and Rahab, so let's get right into this video. This video is going to contain topics of the Bible and me speaking about things of the Bible. If you do not wish to continue, I suggest you click off the video now. You have been warned. The story of Esther, unexpected heroes of faith, from the entire book of Esther. Esther is one of the only two women in the Bible with a book named after her, and what a book it is. Because of its length, we hear more of her story than any other women in the Bible. And it's got some incredible plot twist events that required her to muster every bit of courage she had. Of all the women we meet in this study, Esther is maybe the most unusual. She was the only one who was a queen, for one thing. Hers is also the only story that takes place entirely outside the land of Israel. While Ruth's journey began in Moab, her passage to Israel, both literally and spiritually, was at the heart of her story. But Esther lived only in Persia, along with her entire community, the rest of the Jews who had been captive and who remained there. So in reading her story, we get a sense of entering a world apart, and the sense of a distance from Israel, from her Jewish community, and even at times it seemed from God, is a big part of how Esther adventures unfolds. Our first clue about Esther comes in her name, which wasn't even Jewish. Some scholars believe it's a variation of Ishtar, the name of the Babylonian fertility goddess, and a popular female name in Babylon and Persia, or simply that it means star. Either way, Esther wasn't a Jewish name, but Esther did have one of those as well, Hadash, meaning myrtle tree. In her everyday life, her pagan name would have been the one she used, and this reveals to us a Jewish community that has been uprooted not just from the land of Israel and its exile, but also from their own concept of themselves as God's chosen people. Many years before, a remnant of them had returned from exile to Israel, led by Ezra and Nehemiah, but Esther's family was among the Jews who stayed behind and assimilated into Persian culture. After 70 years in Babylon, then under the rule of Persia, they established homes and families, becoming comfortable and complacent with a different way of life. Jews like Esther would probably have known nothing of life back in Judea. A young woman, she has already been visited by tragedy by the time we meet her. The Bible tells us she was taken in and raised by her cousin Mordecai after the deaths of her parents. Esther is also the only story that takes place entirely in a city, and not just any city, but Susa, the great Persian capital. Next to Susa, Jerusalem looked like a peasant backwater. A huge city of as many as million people, Susa boasted stunning architecture, and its ruins survive today. Indeed, it was the center of all art, industry, and scholarship in the vast Persian Empire. There was nothing in Israel like a magnificent royal city, and Esther likely grew up there, as did thousands of other Jews, because generations before, her ancestors had been captured by Nebuchadnezzar's forces and taken to Babylon. When Babylon fell to the Persians, captive communities moved into Persian lands as well. This migration of Jews from Israel to Babylon and to the Persians and beyond is known as the diaspora, the great scattering of Jewish people throughout the ancient Near East and beyond. This was Esther's world, a sphere where no one she knew had likely ever been to Israel or spoke Hebrew fluently. It's possible that Esther herself didn't know any Hebrew. The Jewish community retained a distinct identity, but it may have been primarily an ethnic one. We also don't know the state of Esther's religious education. We do know that not once does she utter God's name in her story. It would be understandable if the God of her family and relatives seemed far off to her. Did she know any of the great stories of the women of her people, of Miriam and Hannah, of Deborah and Jael? It's possible she heard about them from her older cousin Mordecai, who took her in as an orphan. Was he also the one who made sure she had a Jewish name and knew something about her roots? If we live our faith with integrity, we can feel like Esther at times in our walk with God. As Christians, we're called to live as people set apart from the values around us, often making choices different from the ones our neighbors make. Do you ever feel the same hesitation about those choices that Esther did? thinking twice about revealing who you really are, the sense of otherness from the world around us is a positive sign spiritually speaking. Jesus reminds us that his kingdom is not of this world, and because of that, there is no country, no club, no political party where Christians are fully at home. Scripture tells us that we are strangers and exiles on the earth. Hebrews 11:13. So in a way, the reality of the dysphoria and exile that Esther lived in is the one we're called to live as Christians every day, and that's a good thing. The story of Esther has all the makings of a Hollywood blockbuster. The Emperor of Persia, King Xerxes, gave a great feast and summoned his wife, Queen Vashti, to appear before all of his nobles, wishing to display her beauty. He wanted to show her off, so when she refused to come, the king's rage was ignited and he divorced her on the spot. From the very beginning of the story, the king's absolute authority is clear. If he summoned you and you refused to appear, or if you showed up uninvited, you were in big trouble. Both actions were considered exceedingly disrespectful to a monarch, and insulting the king meant banishment and death. In order to choose a new queen, the king decided to hold a kind of beauty contest and select a new mate from among the most desirable young women in the land. Drafted into this pageant, this would not have been the sort of invitation you refused. Esther quickly became the favorite. Mordecai had specifically instructed her not to reveal her nationality or family background, so this beautiful Jewish woman became the queen of Persia, living in a place surrounded by strangers and cut off from her only family. That's the short and sweet Sunday school version, but this book of the Bible gives us a much more detailed picture about how Esther went from orphan to queen. Before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics, and she would go to the king. In the evening she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to care for the Ch6, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. Esther 2:12-14. This was the arrangement, and we never really learn how Esther felt about it. From Xerxes' point of view, the whole process had no downside. If he had found a woman suitable to be queen, great. If he didn't, well, then he had a stable of concubines. He could flip through and choose a different one every night, the way you or I might choose to watch a movie. He held the power, but God had miraculous plans for Esther. There was something about her that was different, and Xerxes chose her as his queen. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with the royal liberty. Esther 2:17-18. This is exactly what a good novel should end. The beautiful young heroine has achieved the pinnacle of earthly glory and has triumphed. But that is not the end of Esther's story. Instead, it's just the beginning, because this is the story about heavenly glory, not earthly glory. It's a story about God's love for his people and about the courage this young woman found the moment it was needed. The big royal wedding, that's just a blip. Setting the stage for the real drama yet to come, and lurking behind all of this is a darker story of the struggle between Haman, the king's vizier, and Esther's cousin Mordecai. Safe to say, Haman had a healthy ego, and he was furious that Mordecai refused to recognize his exalted position and wouldn't bow to him. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet, having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Esther 3:3-6. I'm going to leave it off right there. I will see you guys in part 2 of the story of Esther. Bye.